Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about sentence focus when you're writing essays, like if you're responding to an essay prompt. And we're going to also focus on how we anticipate the soft spots in our writing. Before we do that, we need to quickly review the subject and the verb of a sentence, because when you write a focused sentence, it has to have a very clear subject and verb. That's crucial to writing a sentence that is focused rather than confusing and a sentence that has soft spots that make it a little hard to understand. So let's quickly review the subject of a sentence. A subject of a sentence is first a noun, meaning it has to be a person, place, or thing. Second, it is who or what is doing the action of the sentence. And third, if there is no action, it's who or what the sentence is about. Let's look at these example sentences right here. Kiara is a very extroverted person. There is no action. Kiara is not doing anything, but Kiara is the subject. I know that because the sentence is about Kiara. Also, Kiara is a person, which means she is a noun, a person, a noun. Second sentence is Chen gave Asha the cupcake. Now, Chen is the subject, but we need to ask ourselves, why is Asha or cupcake not the subject? Because there's three nouns. Well, the action is gave. So since Chen is doing the action, Chen becomes the subject of the sentence. Let's look at the verb of a sentence. Now, the verb of the sentence is usually the action verb, the action word, but sometimes we have what's called a linking verb. So this is a word that links. These are words like is, was, be, are, or am. So for our example, Kiara is a very extroverted person. There is no action word in this sentence, but Kiara is linked to the rest of the idea in the sentence by the word is. So that's a linking verb. Next, we have Chen gave Asha a cupcake. There's only one action verb here, one action word in the sentence, and that's gave. Now, sentences can have more than one verb, but in this case, we're just going to keep it simple. Now, let's look at an example essay question and talk about how we would begin responding to this if this is an essay question on a test. Now, this essay question comes from a test for the book The Schwa Was Here. And if you're an 8th grader, maybe you read that last year, maybe you didn't. If you're a 7th grader, maybe you read it this year, maybe you didn't. But this is a common 7th grade book called The Schwa Was Here. So in the book, the main character, his name is Anthony, but he goes by the nickname Antsy, and he has a lot of ideas about truth. So let's read this essay question. You don't need to have read the book to be able to practice responding. In your own words, explain what Antsy believes about truth and the extent to which you agree with his ideas. So one of the first tips we think about is, oh, well, I need to restate the essay question. But this is kind of a two-parter, right? Explain what he believes about truth is part one, and two, the extent to which I agree with his ideas about truth. So let's talk about a few tips for writing a clear essay response. So first, when you start your essay response, you want to add a little context or background info. So if I look at my example over here, when discussing the truth, Antsy says, or in this passage, Antsy describes. So I start with a little background info. That's usually helpful. Then, and here's the important part, I need to have the subject and the verb near the beginning of the sentence. So right after my background info, when discussing the truth, I have the subject, Antsy, and the verb, claims, the action. Antsy claims that truth is blah, blah, blah. Right? So I would say Antsy claims or Antsy describes. It's important to have the subject at the beginning because then the reader knows exactly what you're talking about, because if you have it at the end of the sentence, that sentence can get really confusing. Number 3, start with a clear answer and then explain later in the response. Don't start with your quote immediately. Don't start with your explanation. Start with your answer. When discussing truth, Antsy claims that it is this. Then you can give examples and explain, right? Now, optional, you could get rid of words like I think Antsy. Now, that's optional because there is a good way to say, I think Antsy believes truth is this. It's okay to do that. But sometimes your answer could actually be a little bit more to the point and a little bit more clear when you just say it. Instead of saying, I think Antsy claims truth is this, you could just say, when he's discussing truth, Antsy says that truth is this. In the passage, Antsy describes truth as blank. You could say in the passage, I think Antsy describes truth as blank, but you don't need to. I already know that's your idea because you're writing the essay response. Now, here on the left is kind of a confusing, unfocused response that I see from students sometimes. What I think Antsy is saying is that truth is blah, blah, blah. Now, I understand what the students are saying, but notice how there is. I have 3 is's in one sentence. That's like really wordy and unnecessary. Instead of saying what I think Antsy is saying is that truth is this, I could just say Antsy's saying that truth is this. I don't need to be that confusing. So my subject and my verb's right here. I want to put that near the beginning. So I want to get rid of the what I think Ansi is saying is that truth is, and make it a little bit more clear. Here's some more tips for clear essay responses. Avoid being too wordy. Sometimes it's actually better to get right to the point. Number 2, make sure that the way you use the language from the prompt doesn't make your response unclear. So remember, let's look back at our prompt. In your own words, explain what Ansi believes about truth and the extent to which you agree with his ideas. Now, typically, I teach students take that prompt and just reverse it, right? So Ansi believes that truth is blank, and I agree with him because, or I disagree with him because. But you want to make sure that you don't get jumbled with your words. When you're trying to rephrase the question and use the same language, you don't want to get too jumbled, too wordy. So let's look back here. So make sure the way you use the language from the prompt doesn't make your response unclear. Let's look at this example here on the left. This is someone that tried really hard to use the exact language for the prompt, but it got a little bit unfocused. The extent I agree with Ansi's belief about truth is that I agree because. Oh, okay. So again, my subject and verb isn't near the beginning of the sentence, and the extent I agree with Ansi's beliefs about truth is that I agree because. The extent I agree is that I agree because. That's a little jumbled in the way they're saying it. It's a little too wordy. It's a little unclear. So we can take that sentence and restructure it to be a little bit more clear. Let's look at this strong, focused response on the right. I somewhat agree with Ansi's description of truth as an ugly reality because. Right here, I said how much I'd agree. To the extent I agree, I somewhat disagree. Then I said Ansi's description of truth as an ugly reality, and then because, and I'm going to explain. So I kept it chunked in 3 clear, focused parts. All right, here's my final tips for you when you're responding to an essay question. You do want to repeat language from the prompt so you're responding to exactly what the question is asking, but make sure the way you use that language from the prompt doesn't make your response unclear. It's kind of similar to our last tip here. So again, same example. The extent I agree with Ansi's belief about truth is that I agree because. That's wordy. It's a little unclear, a little more focused. I somewhat disagree. That's the extent. I somewhat disagree. Then tell me what he believes about truth with his description of truth as an ugly reality. Then explain because blah, blah, blah. All right, so you do want to use language from the prompt, but you don't have to say it word for word. You want to use language from the prompt in a way that your response is still clear and focused. So remember, your tips are keep it straight and to the point, use language from the prompt, but don't get too jumbled. You can say I think, but you don't have to. All right, make sure that you have the subject and the verb, Ansi claims, Ansi describes, near the beginning of your response. You want to have the answer in the beginning, and then you can explain later on. So those are your tips. Now we're going to quickly practice. So if you're an online student, you can get your copy of the activity Sentence Focus Anticipating the Soft Spots open in Buzz in the Week 18 folder. Okay, and if you're not an online student, you can get this activity from your teacher. Let's go ahead and look at it. So this is what the activity looks like. And I'll let you read these instructions on your own later, but I'm going to quickly show you what we're going to do. So again, here's actually a quote from the book, The Schwa Was Here, and then the same question. In your own words, explain what Ansi believes about truth and the extent to which you agree with his ideas. And just to refresh your memory, I've got the examples here that I went through on the video. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do number 1 together. Each of these prompts are questions from like the Practice Ohio Air test for 7th and 8th grade students, or some of these are just from 7th and 8th grade language arts classes. All right, again, you don't need to have read what you're responding to. All I want you to do is just begin like the first sentence of the essay, even if you have no idea what it's talking about, because I want you to practice an essay starter sentence in a way that's focused, and you don't need all the explanation, you don't need all of that. We're just practicing like what would be the first line of your essay response. Let's practice. What is McMillan saying about the Philae space mission's importance for current scientific research? And this comes from one of the, I believe, one of the 8th grade Ohio Air Practice tests. Okay, what is McMillan, so we're assuming that's the author, what is McMillan saying about the Philae space mission's importance for current scientific research? So think about this for a second here. What would we say? Well, there's a few ways we could start. Remember, we want to give a little context. So I might say, in the text, McMillan argues that the Philae space mission has provided crucial information for scientific research because. Now, I don't know. I haven't read about it. I don't know what the space mission is about, but I want you to practice the tips. So in the text, that's my background information. Here's my subject, Macmillan, and here's my verb, argues. And then I just kind of use the rest of the prompt here. In the text, Macmillan argues that, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, I'm guessing this space mission is pretty important for scientific research. So in the text, Macmillan argues that the Philae space mission has provided crucial information for scientific research because. That's it. You're going to end it there. Here's another example that you could use. To Macmillan, the Philae space mission is one of the most important events that has contributed to modern scientific research, period. I didn't tell you any details. I didn't read it, but I said to Macmillan, the Philae space mission is one of the most important events that has contributed to modern scientific research. So for each of these questions, which are all about different things, you're going to practice just the first sentence of how you would answer that question if it were an essay question. Remember, don't say, when I think about it, I wonder about, and I think that maybe he's saying this thing. Like, don't get really wordy and confused. Keep it clear. Subject, verb. In the text, the author states this. Right? And there's like 5 different ways you could answer this, right? So there's not one right answer. All right, so you're going to do 2 through 6, and you're going to practice how you would use a focused sentence to begin answering that essay question as if that were a question you got on a test. All right, good luck as you practice.